Sometimes when I think about God, I think about God like a dog. Especially when you have dyslexia, that works well. Dog, God. Dogs have many wonderful qualities, not the least of which is their non-judgmental love towards us. God is always happy to be with you, no matter how crabby or selfish you are feeling or being. God thinks you are wonderful. Not because of anything you've done, just for who you are. And that's the key. God knows exactly how you are because she made you that way. I look at our daughter who recently had a baby. I think your baby's marvelous, but she keeps holding him up when she's over our house and going, "Isn't he cute? Isn't he cute?" And we have to say, "Yes, he's very cute." What does he do to deserve such devotion? Well, he eats a lot, often in the middle of the night. He spits out large amounts. He poops. He sleeps and cries and very occasionally smiles at her. I can tell you now, if you stayed at my house and did only those things that I mentioned above, you would not have my undying devotion. But if you were my child, we are God's children, and she is crazy about you. God is like a dog, kind of undiscerning in her love, really, if you ask me. Lucky for you, I'm not God. You've probably noticed by now that I'm referring to God in the feminine. I personally actually still find it a little bit jarring because it's not how I was brought up, but I'm really trying to understand the feminine side of God, and I figure after thousands of years of humanity thinking about God as male, the occasional female reference might help. And as my husband said to me last night, what does it even mean when people say that God is male? It's not like God is a physical person. God is not male or female. I mean, do they think that God has genitalia? Anyway, here's some things I've been thinking about recently. Guess where I got the dog? At the dump. I went with my husband, because I love spending time with him, to the dump. And he was bringing some stuff there. And when we got there, there's a little place where they rescue lawn ornaments from certain death before people put them in the thing. And so I took him. He was missing an ear and a tail, and a lot of his neck, he's made from wood, was kind of rotted away. So my husband made him a new ear and a tail and fixed all the rot, and then I repainted him. Now we have a new guard dog that requires no maintenance. Isn't that a great example of the redeeming power of God? She can take any one of us, no matter what kind of shape we are in, and love us into some beautiful thing, like my dog. Next thing. Who made the world? Who made the swan and the black bear? Who made the grasshopper? This grasshopper, I mean, the one who has flung herself out of the grass and who is eating sugar out of my hand, who is moving her jaws back and forth instead of up and down, who is gazing around with her enormous and complicated eyes. Now she lifts her pale forearms and thoroughly washes her face. Now she snaps her wings open and floats away. I don't know exactly what prayer is. I do know how to pay attention, how to fall down into the grass, how to kneel down in the grass, how to be idle and blessed, how to stroll through the fields, which is what I've been doing all day. Tell me, what else is it that I should have done? Doesn't everything die at last and too soon? Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? Many of you may recognize that poem as a Mary Oliver poem entitled The Summer Day. And it's that last line that gets you. What is it that you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? Well, what is it that you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? I hope you managed to spend at least some time just being in nature this summer, just being there, not doing anything, and that is such a hard thing to do. Our advanced civilization expects us to be productive, and so did my parents. They expected you, and my parents were very productive, weren't they? They got stuff done. But if we don't do anything, if we just sit around looking at grasshoppers, how are we ever going to get rich? But you all know God's economy is very different from our own. She values relationship above everything else. Relationship to other humanoids as well as the natural world. Being in a good relationship with all of creation is really a way of knowing God, isn't it? I read a novel this week, and in it the guy talked about a language spoken by some Inuit people called the Yupik people who live up along the Bering Sea. And they have a word that is Elma Yua, and it means a kind of spiritual debt that we have to the natural world, or a way of moving through the world with some measure of generosity, grace, or a way of living that acknowledges the soul of another human being, or the soul of a rock, or a piece of driftwood. It's sometimes translated as soul, sometimes translated as God, but it means neither. I'd say that God has Elam Yua for all of her creation, and wouldn't it be wonderful we could emulate that? I found a couple of things that might help you with that this summer. First of all, I have a summer devotional based on Mary Oliver's poems. It's not meant to be used on a strict schedule. You can just take it up from time to time as you wish over the summer. And here's an example of some of the things they suggest for you to try. Can you read that? Yeah, it's a bit small. I'll read one of them to you. I can't read it. Anyway, I can send that to you if you want. Okay, it's very cool. Okay, the next thing I have to suggest for you is, I found about this free app recently. Do you know that one? It's called Merlin. It's from Cornell University. And I often use it first thing in the morning. And I found that I can actually stay in the present moment for 5 whole minutes, which is a long time for me, listening to the birds. And, when I was writing this down, I had this very clear memory of being about 14 years old and sitting in the kitchen and listening to my mom describe to my dad all the birds that she had seen at her bird feeder that day. And I very clearly remember thinking to myself, I can't imagine that my life would ever be so boring that I would think about birds and what birds I saw that day. Is that all adults think about? Is that what I have to look forward to in adulthood? I'm never going to be like that. That was me at 14. And here we are, talking about bird apps. For the younger folks out there, don't worry. Adulthood is not as boring as it sounds. Okay, it is boring, but you'll be boring too, so it'll all work out. Next idea. I'd like to tell you about some of the inspirational people that I've read about recently. See if you know who they are. Does anyone know who this is? This is a hard one. Anyone know who that is? Celinda, you might. Whew. Yeah, nice. Ben got it too. Well done. He was a world-renowned psychiatrist, and he was a pupil of Sigmund Freud, right? Jung developed Freud's ideas of psychoanalyst. You know what I mean? What? Psychoanalysis, thank you. In my very uneducated opinion of Freud was that he was just a little preoccupied with sex, but Jung developed his ideas, and I read an autobiography of Jung. That was a slog. And I felt that Jung had a much more balanced nuanced approach to psychiatry. But it's this idea of his that I read about that I want to tell you about. Jung believed that if God wants to speak to us, first of all, it will feel like our own thoughts. When God speaks to us at first, it will feel like our own thoughts. How else could God come to us? I mean, saving, it didn't feel like sending an angel or something. That's why we have to be taught to recognize, to honor, and allow that sometimes our thoughts are God's thoughts. The idea that some of my thoughts might be God's thoughts has always concerned me, because I know that some of my thoughts are definitely not from God, and it takes courage and practice to learn how to discern. Okay, second guy, more of you might know this one. Come on, Kathy, give someone else a chance. I didn't see your hand up. You're right, Kathy. It's Malcolm X. It's actually the 100th anniversary of his birth on Tuesday this week. It might seem like he was from a long, long time ago, but he actually would be about the same age as my father would be if he were alive now, and my dad just died a couple of years ago. When he was a little boy in the southern states, some white supremacists burned down his family home, and in that it killed his father. And then the police reported his father's death as a suicide. That event traumatized his mother so much that she was later put in a mental institution, and Malcolm and his 6 brothers and sisters were put out in various foster homes. He was arrested as a young man for larceny. I had to look that one up, that's stealing things. And while he was in prison, he spent a lot of his time reading, and he eventually read and joined the Nation of Islam. And he served as a minister of Islam on his release and became quite famous around the United States. He took the last name X to symbolize his stolen African heritage. The practice when in times of slavery was that the slaves were just given the master's surname or last name, and he did not want that. And so he substituted that with an X. At first, he was not in agreement with Martin Luther King Jr. He did not believe in racial cooperation, although later he made a trip to Mecca and had a great spiritual experience there, and that changed his opinion, and he became very loving and accepting and wanted cooperation of all peoples. But he was not popular, and he was assassinated at age 39 in 1965. I was born in 1961. That's really weird to me to think that I was alive when that happened, that things like that were still happening in my lifetime. You know, I can't imagine how people who endured that kind of racial prejudice could still be loving towards other. We were just talking about it when we were practicing music this morning, and one of the songs we were thinking about had a line about something about my foes, and everyone's like, who's got foes these days? Malcolm X had big foes. Anyway, I met this woman a little while ago, and she said she was a pastor of a church in Victoria, and I didn't know the church, so I looked it up, and then I looked just for fun at their statement of faith. Whew! It included some gems like, we believe in the Genesis account of creation, that it is to be accepted literally, not allegorically or figuratively. No evolution. Another one, we believe that the wicked depart to Hades, where they are in conscious torment until the final resurrection and judgment, at which time the righteous enter into everlasting felicity in heaven, and the wicked into everlasting conscious suffering in hell. I found myself thinking too, well, I don't want to be friends with that woman, or her God, for that matter. Even though if you had met me 20, 25 years ago, and Celinda will attest to this, I had exactly the same beliefs as she does. But I had no interest now that God's redeemed me and shown me the light, I had no interest in getting to know this woman. How on earth did Malcolm X manage to go through life with any degree of love or grace when people had been so cruel to him and his family? What does William Blake say? We are put on this earth a little space that we may learn to bear the beams of God's love, God's beams of love. Why is it so difficult for us to believe that someone could love us? We've been watching this show on Netflix this last week, and it's called The Sixth Commandment. Has everybody watched that? It's based on a true story that took place in England about 10 years ago. It tells a story of Ben Field, this is a real picture of him, Ben Field, that young man, and that older gentleman who was named Peter Farquhar. And so Ben Field, when Peter met him, didn't have a job, but he volunteered at the local church, and he was going through the discernment process trying to decide if God was calling him to be a priest. And so he convinced this 69-year-old man, Peter, of his affection for him. And so eventually Peter invited him to move in with him. And Peter was gay, but had been suppressing his sexuality for years. And he finally accepted Ben's love, and the pair became betrothed, with Ben eventually convincing Peter to make him the sole beneficiary of his will. Unbeknownst to Peter, Ben had begun drugging him with hallucinogens. Later in court, the lead prosecutor told the jury that Peter had become a dribbling shambles of his former self. Nobody understood. Peter didn't understand what was happening. They just thought he got horribly ill. Ben eventually killed the 69-year-old man with the drugs and stuff, and in 2015, but he made it look like he had drunk himself to death. The older man, Peter, was completely blinded to any nefarious intentions of the younger man, Ben, because he was so overwhelmed, feeling deeply loved for the first time in his life. He'd never had a romantic relationship with anybody else, and we all know how heady that can be. Peter's gratitude at being loved is painful to watch. It was hard to watch. Wanting to be loved is the primary desire of every one of us. And lucky for us, God's on it. She is dogged in her pursuit of us. If we can take the time and be brave enough to see it and accept it, we are truly blessed. We have learned to bear the beams of God's love for us. Okay, here's my last idea. I have one more practical thing to leave you with. It's a practice called welcoming prayer. I think I talked about it maybe about 5 years ago. You know it, Celinda. More than any other kind of prayer that you might do, it really is a practice, because the only way it works however it works, it's only going to happen when you're actually doing the prayer. Okay? So it's called welcoming prayer. It comes from a book. Cynthia Bourgeau's book on centering prayer and inner awakening, and I think you still have my copy. Yeah, you do. It's okay, I gave it to you. So this practice is from the chapter on welcoming prayer towards the end. I'm finding it to be an extremely powerful, although difficult, spiritual practice. It's got 3 steps. The first step is focus and sink in. The second step, I should have made a slide of this. Oh, well, I didn't. The second step is welcome, and the third is let go. So focus and sink in. That's the first step. To focus means, and to sink in means to the feeling, like the physical feeling that you have in your body. If it's a physical pain, like a toothache, you can feel that pain. And you can put your whole attention on it. And exactly the same is true for emotions. If you are angry, see if you can be present to how the anger is manifesting it in your body. Is your jaw clenched? Is your stomach feeling upset? If fear is present, what kind of sensation does that produce in your body? Is your breath short? Is there a sense of vertigo maybe, or a stampede of fight or flight adrenaline? So try and find that feeling that strong emotion produces within you. That emotion produces. And don't try to change anything, just try and stay present. Focusing on the feeling does not mean psychoanalyzing. This is not about trying to discover why you feel the way you do, or justifying your feelings. This first step is the key to the whole practice. By becoming physically aware of the energy as sensation in your body, you can stay in the present moment and welcome it. That's weird. Welcome, the second step. Now comes the most inscrutable and counterintuitive instruction of the whole idea of welcoming prayer. The idea is that you sit there steeped in that feeling and you begin to say ever so gently, welcome anger, or welcome pain, welcome. What? How's that again? If this emotion is what necessitated the practice in the first place, why are you welcoming your anger? Isn't it the goal to get rid of it? Well, in this practice, actually, no. The goal is to not let it chase you out of the present moment. Admittedly, this seems stupid and paradoxical. Common sense tells you that the emotion is the problem, and so the solution would be to eliminate that emotion. But by welcoming it instead, you create an atmosphere of inner hospitality. By welcoming it instead, you create an atmosphere of ability to change. By embracing the thing you once defended yourself against or ran from, you are actually disarming it, removing its power to hurt you or to chase you back into your more egotistical self. There's a wonderful novel by Ursula Le Guin, I don't know if I'm saying that right, called A Wizard of Earthsea. Does anybody know that book? Paul does? Yes? Kathy? Shammy does? Chris? So it's actually kind of an extended meditation on that point I just talked about. And it's about this young wizard named Jed, and he's in training to become a sorcerer. And so one time when he's just playing around with his friends, he inadvertently conjures up a minor demon. And the demon proceeds to haunt him through the rest of the book. As Jed grows in power and influence, the demon grows in power and influence right along beside him. And gradually the demon turns very dark and begins to stalk him. And Jed flees in terror. He runs to a city by the sea, but it follows him there. He hires a boat and rows out into the sea, but the demon follows him there. Finally, he jumps into the water, but the thing is still right on his back. Finally, with all escape routes blocked, he does the only thing left to him. He turns to the demon and he embraces the demon. At which point, the demon vanishes, integrated back inside of him as the shadow he's finally willing to own. Jed's experience of liberation is the practical wisdom behind this mysterious second step of the welcoming prayer practice. This moment can always be endured with God by your side. It's something that the great saints and mystics have always known. Okay, a couple of important points. First, what you are welcoming is the physical or psychological content of the moment only, not a general blanket condoning the situation. What about people with abuse histories? They might think, abuse shouldn't be welcome, should it? No, that misses the whole point. What you are welcoming in that moment is not abuse, but the feelings triggered by that. The fear or the rage or the shame that abuse has triggered. This is a very important mistake to nip in the bud, because if uncorrected, it could lead to the assumption that surrendering means roll over and play dead, or that the purpose of the practice is to teach you to passively acquiesce to situations that are in fact intolerable. This is not so at all. You're welcoming the feelings, not the situation. Third step, let go. Don't get to this step too quickly. The real work in welcoming prayer is actually accomplished in the first two steps. Stay with them, going back and forth between focusing and sinking in and welcoming until that knot of emotion begins to dissolve of its own accord. And yes, letting go is just for now. It's not a final, forever renunciation of your anger and fear. It's simply a way of gently waving farewell as the emotion starts to recede. If you can't quite make it to the step when you're practicing that, the final step, it's okay. Just go back and do 1 and 2 again and again and again. When you get there, when you're ready to let it go, there's 2 ways to go about it. You could do it a short, simple way, or you could do a more complex litany. The short way, you could simply say something like, I let go of my anger, or if you prefer, I give my anger to God. Mary Morzowski, who created this welcoming prayer, she preferred a more complex thing that she would say to herself. And when it came to the time for the third step, she would always say these things to herself. I let go my desire for security and survival. I let go of my desire for affection and esteem. I let go of my desire for control and power. I let go of my desire to change the situation. And she would always doing that, whether she was dealing with physical or emotional stuff. That last one, I let go of my desire to change the situation, gets you right between the eyeballs and is a stroke of pure genius. And that's the one that always trips me up. I want the situation to change, not me. Okay, I know you're dying to know, how can I get my hands on all these juicy spiritual practices? The summer devotional for Mary Oliver's poems and the directions for welcoming prayer. I'll put in a picture of that app so you can look it up, some other stuff. Send me an email at Pamela at theplace. And actually, I invite you to do that right now. Just get out your phone. It's okay. My address is Pamela at theplace.ca. Say something to the effect of, I want it. If you're not interested, which is perfectly understandable, but you still want to look spiritually superior to the people sitting around you, you could always get out your phone and just write a text to your mom or something and say, hey Mom, I'm in church. Aren't you proud of me? So go ahead and do that if that interests you. Well, we're at the end. God is dogged, folks. You be dogged too.